Welcome back into the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wenzel, and today we're going to finish breaking down our top 24 running back rankings for 2023. If you missed part 1 of this video, we broke down running backs 1 through 12. That is on our channel, and you may as well subscribe and turn on those notifications while you're there so you know when all these videos are coming up and you don't miss any of them. But today, in this video, we're going to break down running backs 13 through 24 straight out of our draft guide for 2023. fellasdraftguide.com if you want to get your hands on that. Projections on over 240 different players this year. If you want to get it for free, sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code FELLAS. Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100, and that will get you the draft guide for free. Again, promo code FELLAS on Underdog Fantasy, $100 welcome bonus, and our draft guide for free. I'm not going to waste any more of your time, though. You're here for the top 24 running back rankings. Let's break down running backs 13 through 24. Alrighty, so let's start with a recap of where we've been. Running backs 1 through 12, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, and Aaron Jones, and Breece Hall in that order. There's one more player we are going to add to the B tier. Najee Harris comes in as our running back 13. He's my running back 16, excuse me. He's our consensus running back 13. He's my running back 16, Cameron's running back 13, Tyler's running back 12. It was truly a tale of two halves for Najee Harris last year. Weeks 1 through 8 before their bye week. Their bye week was in week 9. So weeks 1 through 8, running back 23, 108 rushing attempts, 361 yards, only 3.3 yards per carry. 1 rushing touchdown, only 28 targets. That was 16th. 24 receptions, 112 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, that's abysmal. Everybody was saying Najee was a bust. But then if you went out and bought low on him, you got the running back 7 from weeks 10 to 18 last year. 164 rushing attempts. That was third most during that stretch. 673 yards. That was the third most. 4.1 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Receiving work didn't change all that much. 25 targets, 17 receptions, 117 yards and a score. So in the second half of last year, right, the Steelers offense finally started to figure out how to get Najee Harris involved far more effectively. That being said, I think it's risky to assume that we're going to see the tail end of last year be representative of Najee Harris' season this year. I don't trust Matt Canada at all. Whatsoever. I keep reading articles that are saying, oh, Matt Canada is going to make this change. He's going to open up the playbook more. That's false. Matt Canada said he's not going to open up the playbook more. I don't trust him. I think Jaylen Warren is going to continue to get more and more involved in this offense. Not to the point where he wipes Najee Harris out of this offense, but Jaylen Warren is a nice little player. And we saw Najee Harris didn't take on that massive workload like he did his rookie season back in 2021. So I think you're going to see Jaylen Warren mix in a little bit more here. And for the whole, Najee still wasn't efficient last year. That's what's killer, right? 3.7 true yards per carry. That was 57th amongst running backs. 4 yards a touch. That was 40th. 2.13 yards created per touch. That was 45th. He only had 7 breakaway runs of 15 yards or more. That's 29th. Now, the Steelers did go out and improve their offensive line this offseason, sure, but I don't think we can just lock in Broderick Jones, just be a success right away. We've seen plenty of first-round offensive linemen drafted that have struggled in their first year, that have struggled throughout their entire career. You look at Bradbury for the Vikings, right? He's arguably a pretty bad center now. He's a first-round pick. I don't think it's fair to just lock in Broderick Jones as a solidified piece right away. So if Najee never gets his rookie season volume again, I just don't know if he has the right combo of volume and efficiency to produce a top 12 number again. That's why he sits at my running back 16. I have him seeing very similar volume to last year. He scored 7 rushing touchdowns in both seasons. I have him at 8 this year. He scored 2 receiving touchdowns in his first 2 years in the league. I have him at 3 this year. So even with increased touchdowns, I still just don't think he has the right combo of efficiency and volume to crack the top 12. So he sits at running back 16 for me, but he comes in as our consensus running back 13, which I ultimately don't hate. I just don't think Najee can full out meet that. He could meet that this year. I'm not betting on it though. This is where we're going to go ahead and move into, I said we added Najee to the B tier. I meant we're adding Najee to the C tier because now we're moving to the D tier. Miles Sanders comes in as our running back 14. He's my running back 14. Cam's running back 14. Tyler's running back 13. We love Miles Sanders this year. Love Miles Sanders. Obviously, he was playing incredibly efficient system in Philadelphia last year where he finished out as the running back 13. He was 8th in carries with 259, 5th in rushing yards, 1,259 yards, 11 total touchdowns, which was 9th last year after scoring nada the year prior in 2021. We all remember that year. And he was 4th in red zone touches as well with 49. That's a heck of a lot of red zone touches. The downsides, kind of what we expected. Maybe not this first one. I was surprised when I saw this. He was a running back 21 in fantasy points per game. He only scored 12.7 fantasy points per game last year. He was 26th in targets, 26 targets, That was 45th. 78 receiving yards. That was 70th. Obviously, we knew Miles Sanders wasn't going to be a pass-catching back in this Nick Sirianni offense. 20th in snap share, 17th in weighted opportunities. Again, part of a committee. Only 1.86 yards created per touch. That was 50th. Just a few orange flags, potentially. I think a lot of the issues of that, though, are going to be solved now that he's in Carolina, right? He is clearing away the number one back there. Deuce Staley has already said he thinks of Miles Sanders as a 3-down back, which is great news. And Chuba Hubbard's he's going to get his work. He's probably going to be involved. But realistically, let's be realistic for a second. Where would you rank Miles Sanders as an offensive weapon with the players the Carolina Panthers currently have? You look at Adam Thielen. He's less explosive. He's aging. I would say Miles Sanders probably a more explosive offensive weapon than Adam Thielen. DJ Chark, no. Miles Sanders in heartbeat. Jonathan Mingo, highly touted guy, high second-round draft capital, 39th overall. Look, rookie, okay? There's more trust in Miles Sanders there who's proven that he can take on a workload, right? So I think there's really a large opportunity here for Sanders to take on a fairly large role in this offense and be a safety valve in the checkdown game for Bryce Young. I'm loving his value. RB19 in redraft and best ball right now. I didn't realize that. I think RB14 is definitely closer to his ceiling. I will say that, but I'm far more willing to bet on that than not. I think Miles Sanders could take on a big workload this year. I'm loving his value at running back 19. So we'll move on to the next player in the D tier here. That is Jahmyr Gibbs. He's my running back 18. Cam's running back 11. Tyler's running back 17. And if I'm going to be honest for a second here, I probably need to come up on Jahmyr Gibbs. I've been burned far too many times doubting rookie running backs. I remember Leonard Fournette's rookie year. Man, that Jaguars offense, just putrid. Terrible offensive lines. They're just going to stack the box. Nobody thinks Blake Bortles can beat them. Didn't matter. Leonard Fournette, phenomenal year, right? I've been burned on rookie running backs too many times where, especially with the draft capital that Jahmyr Gibbs got, Dan Campbell's going to use this guy, right? And my ranking of RB18 isn't, I don't doubt Gibbs, okay? I don't doubt Gibbs. I just doubt how fruitful he can be in the offense that also brought in David Montgomery this offseason and paid him a nice chunk of change this offseason. The wide assumption here, right? He's taking over the DeAndre Swift role in this offense. And I'm convinced, I have been a DeAndre Swift truther from the get-go. I'm convinced Dan Campbell had some sort of vendetta against that man. He's just incredible. Swift's 17-game pace last year, just to understand what Jahmyr Gibbs is stepping into, it was insane. 70 targets in 14 games last year, despite playing more than 40% of the snaps in only 3 games. Only 3 games he saw more than 40% of the snaps. That is insane. And he still saw 70 targets. Just let that soak in for a minute. 17-game pace for 85 targets last year. So since 2017, we take that into consideration. All running backs with 85-plus targets and at least 120 rushing attempts have finished top 10 in total fantasy points per game. So that's where I'm okay, I probably need to come up on Jahmyr Gibbs. And Dan Campbell said, I want my Alvin Kamara. We'll look at Kamara's rookie season in 2017, stack that up against metrics. 120 rushing attempts. There we go. That's where we pull that metric from. 721 rushing yards. That's 6.1 or attempt per attempt. You can argue if that's you can decide whether Jahmyr Gibbs will actually see 6.1 yards per carry, but 8 touchdowns, 100 targets in the receiving game, passes that 85 plus threshold, 81 receptions, 826 yards and 5 touchdowns. So there is a larger chance that we may actually realize that Jahmyr Gibbs could be a top 10 running back this year. Like, there is a fairly large chance that could happen. So I probably need to come up from RB18. The fact that he's at RB15, I think is probably fair. That's about where he's going in redraft and best ball right now. So I'm totally fine betting on Jahmyr Gibbs at that ADP. I actually really like him there. His upside is massive. And if he actually does get more rushing work than we're anticipating, he could be in for an absolutely massive year. So yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs at running back 15 feels just about right. Let's move on to Joe Mixon. He's my running back 13. Yikes. Cam's running back 15, Tyler's running back 20. I'm going to say this because with Joe Mixon, people are going to say, this is way too high. Joe Mixon is going to play all 17 this year. We just don't have a confirmed suspension. Therefore, we're projecting him a full 17 games. Like, this could very much be an Alvin Kamara where people are like, oh, how is he in your top 15? Well, because he hasn't actually been suspended yet. And Joe Mixon hasn't been suspended yet. So therefore, we are projecting him out a full 17 games this year. There's more risk baked into the ADP, right? Like, understand that. Like, this coming out of our draft guide, this is merely what we project over 17 games. You all can bake in your risks, anything else that you want to take into account. We're just projecting if everything were perfect, this is how things would shake out. You can bake in your own risk there in terms of suspension, because he could be suspended at any point in the next 8 months, if we're being honest. That being said, I need to do some tweaking on Joe Mixon's ranking because I hate it. I hate it that I have him as a running back 13. I don't think he's going to be the running back 13 this year. I'm just going to be honest with you. I got to go back and do some tweaking here. His efficiency metrics were just putrid, right? We know how bad that was. Maybe you don't, so I'm going to read them off for you. 3.72 yards per carry, that was 61st. 4.7 yards per touch, 35th. 2.33 yards created per touch, 43rd. Only 28 evaded tackles, 49th. 2.8% breakaway run rate with a decent amount of volume last year, 47th. Only 6 breakaway runs. That was 35th. Now, his saving grace, beside his 150-point game in week 9, was really the receiving work that he got. He was 7th in targets, 5th in receptions, 6th in the receiving yards, 7th in target share. That's all the good news I have for you. That's all I can tell you. Like, Joe Mixon will probably still be involved in this passing attack. I still think he will. After his 50-point game last year, though, he was the RB27 in fantasy points per game from week 10 on. There's not much hope for Joe Mixon. I don't think he gets any more efficient this year. He'll probably stay involved in the passing attack. So I need to come down on touchdowns maybe. I have him for 238 rushing attempts this year. He was on pace for 255 last year. 74 targets and 2 more touchdowns than last year. 74. I have him for 74 targets, and I have him scoring only 2 more total touchdowns than last year. So maybe that's where I need to come down is those touchdowns, but I got to figure out how Mixon came out as my running back 13 because I don't think he actually finishes there. I think he finishes far more closer to the running back 20 than the running back 15. He finishes between 15 and 20. I got to get him in there somewhere. Let's move on, though. I don't want to sit and talk about Joe Mixon because he disgusts me. This guy isn't much better, though. I'm going to be honest. Maybe that's a hot take. Our consensus running back 17 is Travis Etienne. I'm ready for all the hate on this. He's my running back 17, Cam's running back 17, Tyler's running back 15. Let's start here. He was the running back 23 in fantasy points per game last year. And I really don't... I don't want to lay into Travis Etienne. I don't. I think he's a really talented running back. But I just don't get the top 12 hype. I don't get it. And I understand the upside he possesses. He's been incredibly efficient. He's a talented pass catcher paired with his college quarterback. He was an elite prospect coming out of college, right? He was one of 6 running backs to ever receive a perfect 99 overall draft score per Next Gen Stats. I brought that up when we were talking about Breece Hall last episode, right? Travis Etienne is one of those dudes. He has a tremendous talent. But man, there is so much working against him here. There's so much working against him. Doug Peterson has made it clear they don't want him taking on as big of a workload this year. And that workload, let's talk about that workload, okay? Because that workload was nothing extraordinary. We're talking 17th in snap share, 19th in opportunity share, 14th in weighted opportunities, 13th in carries, 15th in routes run. And so it's not like Etienne was bearing the weight of the Jaguars offense or anything. Like, this is a very average workload. So then the Jags go ahead and, they draft Tank Bigsby out of Auburn. A guy all three of us fellows really like coming out of the draft. I think he has a lot more juice than people gave him credit for. And that's not to say, like, Tank Bigsby is better than Travis Etienne, because he's not. Like, Etienne is obviously still the superior back, but Bigsby figures to be more of the straight downhill runner in short yardage situations. They get close on the goal line. It's probably going to be Tank Bigsby pounding the ball in rather than Travis Etienne. And Etienne wasn't exactly a touchdown machine last year either. So it's not like those are going to have the opportunity to go up. He only had 5 total touchdowns last year. That was 31st amongst running backs. Okay, but what we do know is that Tank Bigsby isn't going to overtake his receiving work, right? Because Travis Etienne is clearly the better pass-catching back. But how much more receiving work is there to go around? How much is there, right? Christian Kirk saw 133 targets last year. Zay Jones saw 120. Evan Ingram had 98. Marvin Jones Jr. Yeah, old man there. He had 81. Etienne was 5th in targets on his team with 45. Trevor Lawrence also, I found this fascinating. Trevor Lawrence rarely checks down. I saw a great graphic on Twitter per Ryan Heath of Fantasy Points. Trevor Lawrence had the lowest check down rate in the league last year by a fairly wide margin. Now you add Calvin Ridley to the mix too. Okay. I have Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk both seeing right around 130 targets. I have Ridley at 132 and Christian Kirk at 128. Zay Jones is still there. He's probably going to demand 90 to 100 targets. Evan Ingram, he'll probably see 75 to 90. Where is the opportunity for Travis Etienne to increase his target share amidst all those other weapons who all saw more targets than him last year, albeit with no Calvin Ridley? But we all know Calvin Ridley is going to take on a very demanding target share. Maybe he goes from 45 to 55 targets, which is where I have him at. I have him at 55 targets in our draft guide. Still only comes out to be my running back 17. So if you want to be a believer in Travis Etienne, be my guest. Be my guest. I just don't see the path to major improvement in 2023. To make that leap from the RB23 in fantasy points per game, to make that leap to be a top 12 back. I don't see it. I don't see it happening. If they're going to take rushing opportunities for him, if they're not going to give it to him around the goal line, and if there's not much more room to increase his target share, I don't see it happening. I don't see the path. Everything that we have learned, I don't see the path. I'll happily be wrong. RB17 feels probably pretty close to right for Travis Etienne if we're being perfectly honest with ourselves. And if we're willing to come to grips with the fact that this Jaguars offense might not be as dynamic of a fit for Travis Etienne as we once thought. Let's move on to running back 18. I spent a lot of time on Etienne there. James Conner. He's my running back 15. Comes in as our consensus running back 18, which is where Cameron has him at. He's Tyler's running back 19. I'm head over heels for James Conner, man. I got to say it. I'm head over heels. I don't care how garbage this Cardinals offense is. He's been so good without Kyler the past 2 years. In 2022, he averaged 19.5 fantasy points per game without Kyler. That's weeks 10 through 11, 14 through 17 as well last year. So you get 6 games in there without Kyler last year. 19.5 fantasy points per game. From week 10 on, he averaged 19.8 fantasy points per game. You want to guess where that was? The running back 2. Second most fantasy points per game from week 10 on last year. Now you throw in the 3 games without Kyler in 2021 as well. He missed 3 games that year as well. I believe that was weeks 9 through 11. Averaged 21.5 fantasy points per game. Now, I get the concerns around James Conner. I really do. I honestly do. Cliff Kingsbury. Is he still over? Where did he vacation to? Thailand? Is he still there, you think? He's out. Jonathan Gannon is in. That offensive system could totally change. And they might not just force feed James Conner around the goal line. That's totally possible. That being said, his only competition is Keontae Ingram, Corey Clement, Tyson Williams. The great 3-week production we got from Tyson Williams is now the 4th string in Arizona. Connor's superior by a good margin there. He's still not an efficient running back. Okay, I get that. Yards per carry did improve last year, but still only 4.2 yards per carry. That was 33rd last year. That's not a great metric. I understand that. He's not a workhorse either. I also understand that. 183 carries last year in 14 games. That's only 14 attempts per game over a 17-game season. I'd put him at 238 attempts, so it's not a dissatisfactory number, but again, Connor's not a workhorse, which is understandable. And this Cardinals team is just going to be garbage. Okay, right. Scoring opportunities are going to be down. James Conner might not get as many opportunities around the goal line. I get it. I 100% get that. I just can't help but think with D-Hop gone, he's probably the second option in this offense that's proven to be very, very, very helpful and useful for your fantasy lineups when Kyler Murray even hasn't been playing. So, I don't know, maybe RB15 is too high. Maybe I'm a little too optimistic with how bad this Cardinals offense is going to be. But running back 26 in redraft, running back 28 in best ball, that's his ADP. Like, that's such a steal to me. Like, if I'm going to zero RB it and James Conner ends up being my running back 1 in like the 8th round, please. I'll take that every day of the week. That's just how much I'm in on James Conner this year. Let's move on to the E tier. First player in the E tier, Rachaad White. So running back 19 consensus. He's my running back 20. Cameron's running back 19. Tyler's running back 16. And really what puts Rachaad White here is just his receiving work. Look, Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette last year, they combined for 141 targets. 141. 58 of those were to Rachaad White. Here's the thing though. I can't necessarily build out a pro Rachaad White case for you, other than he's probably going to get a ton of receiving work this year. I don't think this Bucs team is going to be that good. You look at his efficiency metrics last year, they were pretty bad. All three of us fellas have him statted out for less than 220 rushing attempts this year. No more than 76 targets. So I don't think he's actually going to make a push to crack the top 15. But even if he gets half of those 141 targets last year, like he'll probably prove to be a running back 2 because he's still the running back 1 in this offense. Like, I didn't mention his competition. His competition is extremely mid, man. Chase Edmonds, he couldn't make it in Miami or as a backup in Denver. I'll leave it at that. Denver didn't have a freaking running back last year. No Melvin Gordon. Javonte Williams got injured. Like, if you can't beat out Latavius Murray, no disrespect to Latavius Murray, but like, you can't make it in Denver. I'm not too worried about Rachaad White in Tampa. Keyshawn Vaughn, yeah, he's made a career of being a third string running back. Sorry, Keyshawn Vaughn, I hate to say it. That's what he's been for his career. Then Patrick Laird, former Miami Dolphin, didn't do much there. I had no worries about Patrick Laird whatsoever. So again, I can't build you an analytically sound argument expressing like the major upside that Rachaad White has, but his efficiency metrics were just too bad. But the receiving work is just going to be so invaluable for fantasy football that if he sees 74 targets and 200 plus rushing attempts, like Rachaad White is just going to disgustingly find his way to be probably a top 24 running back this year. He falls in at the running back 19, and part of that is just because he has the receiving upside that a lot of these running backs coming up here just don't possess. And that's what puts him over the top for the E tier specifically. So we'll move on to running back 20, David Montgomery. He's the running back 21 across the board for us. And I think I speak for all three of us fellas when I say Monty is going to take on the Jamal Williams role from last year. Now, what I'm not saying is that Monty scores 17 total touchdowns last year. What I'm not saying is that the Lions fall on the 1 yard line like 13 times, I believe it was last year, and Jamal Williams scored on almost every single one of those. That's not what I am saying. But what I am saying is that Monty's probably going to see the majority of the first and second down work in this offense. He'll probably see a majority of the goal line work in this offense. They paid him a nice chunk of change, as I mentioned, in free agency. They're going to get their use out of him. And the thing is, like, the Lions offense doesn't need Monty to be a workload or an insanely efficient running back. Like, that's what they have Jahmyr Gibbs for. They have Jahmyr Gibbs to take some of that load off and to be like a hyper efficient back. You even look at like Jamal Williams' stats from last year. 262 carries, that's 7th. I don't think Monty needs that amount of carries to be relevant, to be top 24. 17 total touchdowns, right? We, on average, across all three of our projections in our draft guide, again, fellasdraftguide.com. If you want it for free, promo code fellas Underdog Fantasy. We have Monty statted out to average at 10 touchdowns this year. 10 total touchdowns. That's 7 less than Jamal Williams had. He still comes out as our running back 21. 57 red zone touches is what Jamal Williams had last year. It may not be 57 again, but again, I think the majority of those are going to go to David Montgomery and not Jahmyr Gibbs. So it's not necessarily like the volume of opportunities that Monty is going to get, but it's the type of opportunities he gets. It's the type that will lead to fantasy points. You get him around the goal line, Monty's probably going to score the touchdowns. He gets the first and second down work. If he breaks off a few big runs, like it's possible Monty just kind of piles up, not an exciting amount of fantasy points, but enough to get him to the top 24 running backs like we have him at 21. He's not a high upside guy, but you look at running back 28 and running back 26, 28 in redraft, 26 in best ball, I think it's a fine price. If you just end up punting on any of the 26, 27 guys ahead of him, if you end up with James Conner or David Montgomery as your two starting running backs with loaded quarterback and receiving weapons on your fantasy teams, I don't hate that at all. I think that's actually a relatively fine core to have if you go 0 RB this year. So Monty comes in at 20 there. I said he was at consensus 20 or 21, but our consensus 21 is Ken Walker III. He's my running back 26, Cam's running back 23, Tyler's running back 18. That's a little rich for me, but I understand I might have. So originally I had Ken Walker as the running back 29 in my rankings. That was too far. I buried him too far. But it pisses me off that the Seattle Seahawks went out and drafted Zach Charbonnet in the second round. It pisses me off because I absolutely loved Zach Charbonnet coming into the draft. I loved him. I was hoping and praying. I was praying for times like these that Zach Charbonnet would get second round draft capital, and he did. Just with literally the worst landing spot possible for everybody involved in that offense. Between the two, I have nearly 400 carries projected. And I have this being pretty much a 60-40 split. I just don't believe Zach Charbonnet was drafted to be a pass-catching back because that's not what his forte was. He's a good pass-catching back, but he's not a Rachaad White, right? He's not extreme example, Austin Eckler. He's not a J.D. McKissick. That's probably the best example. Charbonnet is going to get his rushing attempts in this offense. So I have Ken Walker set up for 238 attempts, 1,100 yards, and 9 touchdowns. It's not bad. Nearly 1,200 yard, almost halfway to 1,200 yards from 1,100. 9 touchdowns on the year. That ain't bad. But Charbonnet's chipping into his already limited receiving role, right? 26 targets, 21 receptions, 124 yards is what I have Ken Walker projected at. That's brutal, man. You're looking at J.K. Dobbins, who we'll get to in a moment. That's what you're looking at in this offense for Ken Walker. He can get all the rushing work in the world. He can get all the goal line opportunities in the world. But Ken Walker's probably going to need to score 12 plus touchdowns this year to crack top 15, which is where he's being drafted at on Underdog right now. It's running back 15. That's far too rich for me. I love Ken Walker, the talent. I do. I really, really do. I love his fit in the Seattle Seahawks offense. I really do. 79 evaded tackles last year. That was 10th. And remember, this dude didn't actually start getting a bulk of the carries and being productive until week 5 when Rashad Penny got injured. 79 evaded tackles. That was 10th. 31% juke rate. That's 12th. 8th in breakaway run rate. 3rd in breakaway runs. Again, this is a guy who was getting volume last year. This isn't just, a small sample size and, oh my gosh, that percentage is super high. And man, look at how many of his runs are breakaway runs. This is with volume. So I love Ken Walker's fit in this offense. I just think Zach Charbonnet with second round draft capital. Let me be very clear. Second round draft capital. That is not nothing. That puts far too much of a damper on Ken Walker to be a top 20 back for me. Seattle just put on his funeral for him. I feel so bad because this didn't need to happen. I really hope Ken Walker proves me wrong. I'll say that. I really hope Ken Walker proves me wrong, but I'm too much of a believer in Charbonnet that they didn't just draft him to be a third down back. Because that's not what Zach Charbonnet does best. They could have waited. In this draft to get a pass catching back. I don't think they just took him to be a pass catching back. They're going to take some of the work off of Ken Walker this year, and I think that just really tanks his fantasy value. And they drafted them to be more of a 1-2 punch than to be a complement or supplement to Ken Walker. Running back 22 consensus. We're still in the E tier here. J.K. Dobbins. My running back 23. Cam's running back 20. Tyler's running back 28. Ty, you got him pretty low, man. I get it, though. Because, the question is, are we finally going to get a healthy season of J.K. Dobbins? Maybe. We'll see. We know what talent this dude has, right? 6 yards per carry his rookie year, 5.7 in 8 games last year. Incredibly efficient. Third in breakaway run rate, 10.9%. He was second in juke rate, 43.4%. 5.7 yards per touch. It's ninth. This dude is explosive. He's elusive. He's agile. Everything we love about J.K. Dobbins. But what changes is Todd Monken going to make to this offense? And how is it actually going to impact J.K. Dobbins? That is the big question that not a lot of people have answers to. Here's what we know. Monken isn't going to run an offense that's slow as freaking molasses like Greg Roman did, right? So the team should average more plays per game. Now, what that split will be is to be determined between passing and rushing the ball. But just because the team isn't so run-centric like it was with Greg Roman does not mean Dobbins is going to see a massive fall-off in rushing attempts per game or touches per game. That doesn't necessarily mean that, because if they increase the plays per game, there's opportunity for that to kind of balance out. It's a whole experiment that not a lot of people have answers to at this moment. I feel like running back 22 feels fairly justified, though, because we know the incredible upside that Dobbins has. We know the efficiency that he has. He's never been much of a receiver. We already know that, so that's not going to boost him to be this top 15, top 12 running back, right? And some of the question around what's Baltimore's offense actually going to look like in 2023, I think that's kind of boiled into all of our projections. So, he's going as an RB18 in best ball and redraft right now. That's maybe a little rich for my liking. It's not terrible. If you're a believer in J.K. Dobbins, do it. I support you in that. But there's just other players I like better in his range. And until we actually see what this Todd Monken offense in Baltimore looks like, I don't know how much of the old J.K. Dobbins is going to be relevant. He'll probably be an efficient back, but how many touches does he get? That's the part that I'm not sure about. So running back 22 feels about right, just with the murkiness around there. He's probably the last running back before we really see a fall off of some really big question marks around some of these other guys. I feel like there's question marks around Dobbins, but not as many big ones as some of the guys coming up here who we will talk about. Last player in the E tier, running back 23, Alexander Mattison. Now, I have a confession to make. Alexander Mattison, he admittedly came in as our running back 24 in our consensus rankings. But Cameron Tyler, I don't want to put you on blast. I find it wild that you two have Mattison statted behind our running back 24. Or running back 23, excuse me. I find it wild that you have Mattison statted lower than our consensus running back 23, when I think I would ask both of you, and I think I know who you would both rather take in the draft. I know you both would rather take Alexander Mattison, because I would. He possesses so much more upside. So look, I took the luxury of moving Alexander Mattison up to the E tier, while not majorly, adjusting our rankings in any capacity. So, look, our consensus ranks on Alexander Mattison. He's my running back 19. I absolutely love him. He's Cameron's running back 30, Tyler's running back 25. So that's where you kind of get the big difference in rankings. But we know the narrative of how good Alexander Mattison has been without Dalvin Cook, right? 4 missed games in 2021. Mattison was the running back 7 in week 3, the running back 6 in week 5, the running back 8 in week 13, and the running back 13 in week 16. Top 13 running back in his 4 starts without Dalvin Cook. That being said, I don't think we should overvalue who Alexander Mattison actually is as an NFL running back, though. As an NFL talent, we shouldn't be overvaluing him, because Mattison is maybe the 20th to 25th best starting running back in the NFL? Alexander Mattison isn't as talented as Dalvin Cook. I think we all know that. Kevin O'Connell probably also doesn't want to give him 300 plus touches like he did with Dalvin Cook. Now, could he see 275, 280? Sure. I don't think he wants to give him 300 plus touches, though. So where does that leave us? Okay. Cam and Tyler both have him statted up for 209 and 196 rushing attempts. I think that's disrespectful. I have him statted at 238, which comes out to about 14 a game over 7 games. I don't think he sees less than 200. I don't think he sees less than 220. If you put him right around 220, that's probably more accurate. Alexander, I don't think they want to give Alexander Mattison a massive workload. But at the same time, Ty Chandler, Dwayne McBride, Kenneth Walker, they're not dudes who are going to keep Mattison off the field after what we've seen. They're not going to keep Alexander Mattison off the football field. I do think the hype needs to be managed, though, because I don't think we can just look at those 4 polled finishes and just say top 15 running back. I don't think we can do that. I think that's very misleading. I think that's extrapolating a very small sample size far too large. I don't know if he cracks a top 15 this year. I just don't think he gets the elite workload that Dalvin Cook did, but I also find it hard to believe he finishes outside of the top 25 running backs because of how dynamic this Minnesota Vikings offense is. As the lead running back, right? Like, he is now the RB1. Dalvin Cook ran a buttload of routes last year. I want to say he ran the second most routes out of running backs last year. I believe that's true. So again, I took the luxury of bumping him up, into that E tier because I think he does possess a lot more upside than our consensus running back 23. But I also think the community might want to pump the brakes on the Alexander Mattison hype this year. So I put him in the E tier, but you all will understand why when I say our consensus running back. Technically, our consensus running back 23, our number 1 player in the F tier is A.J. Dillon. Yeah, you see what I mean now. He's my running back 26, Cam's running back 25, Tyler's running back 22. And I already know a lot of you aren't going to like this because I really don't like it either. Right? Dillon was putrid until week 12 of last year. He was droppable. I dropped him in a league before week 12 last year. And then wouldn't you know, from week 12 on, after I dropped him, running back 9 fantasy points per game, 14.5 points per game. That was 1.8 fantasy points per game more than Aaron Jones. He had 6 rushing touchdowns. I was tied for first. He had 5 top 24 finishes, and 3 of those were in the top 13. That's about the extent of the good news I give you on A.J. Dillon, though, because Aaron Jones is a superior back all around for fantasy football. He's not the superior downhill running back or goal line back, probably, but Jones is very clearly the Green Bay running back you want. That's why we have him statted out, 13 running backs apart in our consensus rankings. I don't even want to spend time talking about the inefficiencies last year either, because it's probably going to be a lot of the same this year, considering the change in quarterback. I don't think that really changes for A.J. Dillon this year. So my rankings probably need to be tweaked because there's at least 2 guys going afterwards that I would probably draft ahead of A.J. Dillon. And I'll just transition us right into honorable mentions then, because there are 3 that I do want to quickly bring up that you're like, oh my gosh, Lucas, how do you not bring these guys up? Honorable mention number 1, Cam Akers. I'm torn because I think he could be the guy this year. I really do in the Rams, but I do know I'd much rather bet on him being the one in the Rams offense than A.J. Dillon being the 2 in the Packers offense. So honorable mention number 1, there's Cam Akers. I would take him ahead of A.J. Dillon for sure. Dameon Pierce, I think a lot of you are going to be upset we left Dameon Pierce off, but there are legitimate concerns for Dameon Pierce. We cannot be ignorant to those, okay? All 3 of us fellas think Devin Singletary is far more competition to him than anyone wants to actually give him credit for. The dude was a running back 1 in Buffalo. I know that's not saying a ton, but he's beating out James Cook last year. He's competition. Dameon Pierce is still the 1, but in games where Pierce saw less than 20 touches last year, he only averaged 8.3 fantasy points per game. 8.3 fantasy points per game on less than 20 touches. It's not like that's 16 or 14, right? 20 touches. He needed volume to be successful last year. That's incredibly worrisome to me if Devin Singletary is going to come in and take carries from him. It doesn't catch passes either, okay? And let's not kid ourselves. This Texans offense still stinks. It still stinks. There's not going to be many scoring opportunities here. I leave it at that. But I understand why some of you would be concerned about Dameon Pierce not being on this list. That's my counter argument to all of you. But then DeAndre Swift. Look, I'd swing on Swift purely for upside over A.J. Dillon. My rankings don't reflect it, but I think it's a balance of how much do you really trust Rachaad Penny to, 1, stay healthy the entire year, 2, make the roster. His contract is fairly cuttable. It doesn't cost the Eagles anything to cut him before the start of the season. But how much do you also trust Rachaad Penny to then dominate that backfield if he does at all? Because I think Swift should be the one over Penny. I think he should. But I also know Nick Sirianni doesn't check down the ball a whole lot either. So if he wants to use Swift in the pass catching game, that might lead to more rushing opportunities for Rachaad Penny. But I would swing on Swift to be the lead back, the team lead in both reception or targets and carries for the Eagles this year. I just think he has a much higher ceiling and a much better offense. So that's the 3rd honorable mention I will bring up. But that brings us to the end of yet another episode on the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications so you know when all of our new episodes are coming up. We're going to be breaking down our top 24 wide receivers and tiers next. If you want your hands on the draft guide that I've been breaking down throughout both of these past 2 videos, the running backs 1 through 12 and 13 through 24, fellasdraftguide.com, projections on over 240 players. We got videos coming on the top 100 players. We got big boards coming. So much in store for you all there. If you want to get it for free, promo code fellas on Underdog Fantasy. They will double your first deposit up to $100, and you'll get our draft guide. You get your hands on that for 100% free. Just have to make a first-time deposit and join one of their contests. We will gladly give you our draft guide for free. That's all I got, though. So thanks for tuning in to another episode on the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. I believe Cameron will be back later this week. He'll be breaking down our top 24 wide receivers and putting them into rankings, or putting them into tiers for you all. My goodness. We will see you all later this week. See you then.